August 10, 2018, a California jury awarded Benecia public school landscaper Dewayne Lee Johnson $289 million for the non-Hodgkin lymphoma he claimed was caused by exposure to Monsanto's Roundup weed killer. That award leads us to ask, should manufacturers be held accountable for the consequences of their pesticides?
Welcome to the award-winning Food Chain Radio Show with your host, Michael Olson. And now get ready for 1 hour of What's Eating What Radio.
Hello out there. You are tuned into the 1404th edition of the Food Chain Radio podcast, or hey, perhaps you're among our friends up there in Drummondville who are tuned in as we stream along in the Food Chain page at metrofarm.com. But whoever you are and wherever you are, welcome aboard. I am Michael Olson, your host for this hour of What's Eating What. Folks, consider Michael Olson's third law of the food chain. Cheap food isn't. If you farm 10,000 acres of commodity soybeans, glyphosate is the magic wand that can alleviate the cost of hundreds of the hoe-wielding farmhands needed to weed your fields. But if you're a public school landscaper that gets drenched by a weed killer spill, glyphosate is the cause of your non-Hodgkin lymphoma cancer. In the landmark 2018 verdict, California law firm Wisner Baum LLP won a $289 million settlement for that cancer against Roundup manufacturer Monsanto Corporation on behalf of landscaper Dewayne Lee Johnson. Since then, Wisner Baum has won over $11 billion in settlements against Monsanto and its new owner, Bayer AG. Given these awards, Bayer, Monsanto, and the world's community of pesticide manufacturers have petitioned the federal government for relief from expensive lawsuits. Their efforts to find relief leads us to ask, should manufacturers be held accountable for the consequences of their pesticides? Well, who better to ask than the slayer of giants himself, Attorney Brent Wisner, managing partner of Wisner Baum LLP. Welcome to the Food Chain, Brent.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Let's see, really quickly, Section 453 is part of a bill approved by the House Appropriations Committee that seeks to restrict Environmental Protection Agency from improving warning labels on pesticides. This provision would effectively prevent the EPA from taking timely action in the response to new health risks associated with pesticide exposure, requiring a full risk assessment before any regulatory changes can be made, and such assessments can take up to 12 years. Before we take on Section 453, you, Brent Wisner, were the lead attorney in the landmark case against Monsanto, in which you convinced the jury to award the public school landscaper Dewayne Lee Johnson $289 million for the non-Hodgkin lymphoma he claimed was caused by exposure to Monsanto's Roundup. To borrow from former President Joe Biden, that was one big effing deal. Wow.
Thank you.
What did you say to the jury that convinced them that you were right and Monsanto was wrong?
Well, the truth is, I really just showed the jury what Monsanto themselves had said behind closed doors. I mean, one of the things we do in discovery and in litigation is we actually uncover the emails, we uncover the internal memorandums, we uncover the things that drive the company to do what they do. And Monsanto's game plan when it came to Roundup and glyphosate was well established. They had a plan, and the plan was to deny any relationship to any injury at all, including cancer, and to basically attack any scientists that published or raised concerns about this issue, which, by the way, included scientists that Monsanto themselves had hired and then immediately fired once they raised the red flags. And so when you show the jury this 40 years of corporate malfeasance, it's pretty easy for a jury to say, okay, yeah, we need to punish this. You know, we have to make an example of this company, just like we would care for any company, to make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
Well, Wisner Baum has since won $11 billion in settlement from Bayer Monsanto on behalf of your clients. What have you learned about the nature of the giant corporation that you would like the world to know?
Well, Michael, I have to fully disclose something. Wisner Baum has not actually earned $11 billion for our clients. What has happened is following that verdict, and then I actually got a $2 billion verdict against Monsanto the next year on a different case. After that, Monsanto then sought to settle all the cases that they had pending against them. And I believe that's where you're getting that $11 billion. So it wasn't all of my clients; it was other people's clients as well. But it was people who were harmed by Monsanto. And I mean, the truth is that that is a staggering amount of money, but it's actually a drop in a very large bucket of the amount of money that Monsanto and now Bayer is making from not just the pesticide, but from the seeds that they sell that go with those pesticides, the GMO seeds that they've developed over the last 20, 30 years.
So it's kind of a package. Get the
Exactly.
seeds, need the herbicide too. Consequent to all of those lawsuits and all of that money, as you say, it's a drop in the bucket. Is American agriculture using less glyphosate as a consequence of what has been revealed during the course of all that litigation?
Unfortunately, I don't think that agriculture is using less glyphosate. I don't think they're using less Roundup. I think what has happened, and you'll see this in a lot of different farms, is that they're starting to protect themselves against it. I mean, Monsanto sold this product as being, safer than table salt, right? That you could take a bath in it, you could drink it like water. It's essentially harmless. And that's just not true. And I think farmers now who are working with this product take precautions. They treat it like a dangerous pesticide that can cause cancer. And I think that's a really great fact that will help improve health outcomes long term. But there is something else going on, right? I mean, the truth is glyphosate always had an end, and that end is Mother Nature, right? Fundamentally, weeds adapt, right? And so the enzymatic pathway that allows glyphosate to work on weeds and kill them and grasses and things of that sort, um, that is just disappearing in what we're calling superweeds, who don't have that pathway to generate energy, and so therefore glyphosate doesn't work on them, right? So we have glyphosate or Roundup resistant weeds that are emerging. And in 20 to 30 years, that's all that's left, right? Evolution is, something is causing a species to die, some evolutionary change and adaptation allows them to survive it. They procreate, and that's what's left. And so what's going to happen post glyphosate is going to be a world where we have to find new ways of killing these weeds. Question is whether that's a chemical solution or other farming practices solution. I think that's going to be where the future of our food supply hangs in the balance, and how we view protecting the health of people eating these foods and or protecting ourselves really.
Well, I don't know if there's anybody who's probably done more research into glyphosate and its impact on the food chain than you, given all of the litigation that you've been involved in. So I'm wondering, what impact do you think glyphosate has had on the food that we eat, our food chain? What has
I think it's
happened?
made it, I think it's made food cheaper, and that's what it's done, right? It's made it so one farmer can farm more acreage today than they could have 30, 40 years ago because of the labor intensive aspect of removing weeds or tilling or God forbid other potentially even worse chemicals that could be used as herbicides. But I think with that comes a price, right? When you devalue agricultural work, when you devalue farmers' work, right, it devalues the entire industry. And so when you're faced with a problem like maybe we need to phase this herbicide out because it has these horrible consequences, right? But well beyond cancer, there's other aspects to glyphosate, like it disrupts the endocrine system, it leads to diabetes, it has all these other really bad side effects. And there's a price you pay. So if you want cheaper food, you have to suffer the consequences as you would expect. The problem is when you want to fix it, right? So now we're in a place where I think people are going, okay, we need to do something about this. We need to get this stuff out of the food chain. We need to stop using it in school grounds. We need to stop spraying it in our yards. Great. Now that we're coming to this realization 40 years later, when all the science and the corporate malfeasance comes to light, Now the question becomes, well, how do we do that? We've spent 40 years telling farmers that what they do is worth less than what they're doing, and now we need more farmers, and no one's there to do it. And so that's the threat that Monsanto and Bayer say. They say, well, if you restrict us, you're going to starve to death because you don't have enough farmers. And well, they created that world that we live in. And so we have to go back to basics. We have to make farming a priority again. We have to pay them more. We have to accept that food that doesn't kill us will cost more than food that does.
Cheap food isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Your third law. Exactly.
There you go. Well, and then we're going to be looking at the nature of how these pesticide corporations are trying to protect themselves now.
Oh, gosh.
Then they're living in a world where they're prime targets for astute law firms such as Wisner Baum.
That's correct.
Before we move on, what first keyed you into the fact that there was something really significant in Dewayne Lee Johnson's case?
Well, I mean, you talk to Lee, and you meet him. I met his family. You know, there's a whole story about how that trial came to be. They're actually making a movie about it. But I mean, the short line is I was a 34-year-old kid who had no business trying this case, and all the lawyers that were the seasoned ones, the ones that knew the case, all befell pretty horrible tragedies in the weeks leading up to trial. And I was sort of the last man standing that knew anything about anything for the case, and so I ended up trying it. Obviously, tremendous victory, but a lot of it hinged on Lee himself and his family and the story he went through. There's a great documentary called Into the Weeds that really tells his story in a really powerful way and shows just physically what he went through, emotionally what he went through as part of his cancer treatment, and how the Roundup that he was spraying on literally a children's playground on a routine basis was, you know, it is a dark world where you're poisoning not just yourself but other people, and what he's had to do to deal with that. So his story was itself powerful, and of course it aligned very closely with the evidence we have of what Monsanto was doing. You know, when someone raised the concern about lymphoma or raised a concern about the safety of the product, they had a program called Freedom to Operate, which was a literally line item budgeted scientific attack campaign to attack the scientists personally, to go after their jobs, to go after their friends, to attack them. Not Monsanto. These are independent people attacking them, just happen to be paid by Monsanto to do that. It's a pretty dark way of thinking about the way the science is supposed to work.
And it made a compelling story for you to take to the jury. Here's the story. And it was the story that sold the jury on convicting Monsanto and opening up a whole world of lawsuits. And here we are much later down the road, and they're coming up with a new way of dealing with it, it seems like, which is Section 453, which is a pesticide labeling and immunity law that we're going to be talking about with Brent Wisner, of the managing partner of Wisner Baum. They the people that took down Monsanto, but Monsanto became Bayer, and the fight is still on. So we're going to pick this up when we come back from the break. Do stay tuned. This is the Food Chain Radio program. Today we're talking about pesticides and you, so stay tuned.
Do you have a car sitting around you want to get rid of? Donate your car and help veterans and their families. Yes, one fast call to the Veteran Car Donation Program and we'll come and remove your car for free. You can donate most cars, trucks, or SUVs in most conditions. The proceeds raised goes to help active military, veterans, and their families. And you get a tax deduction. Operators are standing by. Here's the number.
800-640-9509. Again, that's 800-640-9509.
Attention content producers. You can have access to a complete digital media production facility at Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on SoCal Avenue. Easily rent video and audio equipment, a studio with green screen, editing suite, and audio booth, all at can't say no rates. Schedule a tour to see for yourself at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
happiness into your holiday with a fresh and fragrant Lions Club Christmas tree. When you light up the tree, your family's smile will last into January. Pick up your tree from the Lions Club lot at the Portuguese Hall near Costco. 2 to 7 weekdays, 10 to 7 weekends. While they last. Bring happiness into your holiday with a fresh and fragrant Lions Club Christmas tree. All proceeds go to helping those in need in Santa Cruz.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants. Hello, I'm Jenna. Treehouse Dispensary, we use information about cannabis to build community. Listen to Xavier.
Thank you, Jenna. For those suffering joint pain, Treehouse suggests trying a CBD THC topical like the Balance Salve from local Santa Cruz company, Jade Nectar. Then enjoy the relief.
For answers to your cannabis questions, ask your friends at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 Soquel Drive in Soquel, or ourtreehouse.io.
Handcrafted art, crafts, jewelry, antiques, toys, plus food and so much more. The Holiday Craft and Gift Fair returns just in time for unique shopping this Friday and Saturday, noon till 9 p.m. at the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. Your gift fair admission allows you to walk through Sparky's holiday lights each evening. The Holiday Craft and Gift Fair this Friday and Saturday at the fairgrounds. Information and tickets available at fairgrounds-foundation.org.
Hey, Warren, you know it's been a while since I've been up to your showroom and garden center in Scotts Valley. Maybe the folks out there might want to know where you are.
Absolutely. To find Knox Roofing and the Knox Garden Box Company, just head up into beautiful Scotts Valley. We're at 46 El Pueblo Road, next door to Scarborough Lumber and the beautiful nursery. And when it comes to wood items, we have It's All About Wood gift shop. And of course, the Knox Garden Box. Lots to look at. We'd love to see you at Knox Roofing and the Knox Garden Box store. Okay, thanks, folks.
Welcome back. This is the Food Chain Radio program. Michael Olson with Brent Wisner, who is the managing partner of Wisner Baum LLP. And we're talking about glyphosate and pesticides, and who should be responsible for the consequences of using these substances that are essentially poison, and they're designed to destroy. And what if they're destroying the wrong things or the wrong people? What then? Now, Section 453 is said to be a pesticide labeling and immunity law. And it's is it legislation or is it regulation?
This would be a legislation. So this would be passing a law, which would then affect how regulation occurs.
Okay, it has passed the House, correct?
I don't know. I believe it has. I don't know where the current status of it is because of the government shutdown and all the stuff that's been happening. That's distracted, I think, Congress from working on this, but I do know it has been working its way through Congress.
Yeah, well, Congress has been having a good time lately with the government closure and this and that. My goodness sakes. So it's said to be a pesticide labeling and an immunity law. So let's pull those apart and look at them. Pesticide labeling, what would that entail?
So this is, so really it's a 1-2 punch, right? It's a 1-2 punch way for pesticide manufacturers to be sort of immunized from any liability in any way, and really any regulation. It would be putting pesticide manufacturers on a pedestal at the level of certain industries that we do in society, for better or worse, like the alcohol industry. You can't sue them for anything, right? Yeah. We have these different immunities that are really just special interest groups that have created them. This is their attempt to do that. They want to be treated differently than every other product. And they do that in 2 punches. The first, as you said, is the labeling component. And that is basically completely preventing the EPA from doing what it needs to do to react quickly to the emergence of new information. So you have a study that comes out, shows that there's this really serious risk. It's confirmed with animal studies or whatever. The EPA can't just take quick action to change the label and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to warn people, or you need to change the precautions, or what protective material someone's supposed to wear, any of that stuff. It limits their ability to do that considerably by making them do all these additional things that take time, right? And so the result is, even if something happens, the manufacturers have years to poison people and make billions of dollars before the EPA can even take action. So it's crippling the regulatory aspect of our system. That's the first half of it, right?
So if somebody were to discover that glyphosate was an endocrine disruptor
Sure.
and deleterious to the growth of human beings, and here's the evidence, then the EPA would say, well, okay, prove it. We have to prove this, and we have to go through all of these hurdles that'll take 12 years before we can even do anything.
Well, it's not even necessarily prove it. I mean, that sort of has an intuitive appeal to it, right? Prove it means you have scientific evidence to support it. No, it's jump through hoops to show what we already know, right? It would be the equivalent of you walk outside and there's snow on the ground, and you say, well, I think it snowed last night. And they go, no, you don't know that. Prove it. And so I have to, go test the snow and see if it was a type of snow crystalline structure that would be made by man. I'd have to look at weather reports. I have to do all this other work, but the snow's right there. And it doesn't take rocket science to say we got snow on the ground because it snowed and we need to do something about that snow, which is what Monsanto is doing. It's hiding, or these pesticide manufacturers are doing. They're hiding behind procedure and bureaucracy to delay action, which is the effect of letting them get away, literally in some sense, with murder, right, to make billions of dollars. That's the problem with that first part of the law.
Well, it's a very effective thing to do as well. Put up a bureaucracy in front of something, and good luck on getting anything done. So that would be the pesticide labeling. What is the immunity then?
So this is the dark reality of the world we live in, right? And this actually is the part of the law that the manufacturers really care about, right? Because it's taking a direct shot at lawsuits. And basically what they're saying is they want to prevent anybody from ever suing them. And that the only group that has any authority to do anything about warnings at all would be the EPA. That the EPA is the sole arbiter of what goes on the label, of what is truth. And that if a lawyer like me comes in the courtroom and shows all these studies to a jury and shows this is truth, right, that is insufficient as a matter of law. That the law comes down and says, nope, you no longer get to go to a jury. If you're hurt, you don't get your right in court. You don't get to have a trial. It gets cut off at the knees because the EPA is the ultimate arbiter of the truth. That's what this is trying to do. It's called federal preemption. It's based on the idea that the label and the truth is not dictated by reality, it's dictated by an agency. And the companies want this for one simple reason, and that is historically these agencies have been captured by the industry, right? The very guy, for example, for glyphosate that did the safety assessment for glyphosate on, its health effects, Jess Rowland, was literally talking to Monsanto about how in 6 months he was going to leave the EPA and he wanted a good job with them. And that we have the emails, right? Deep-seated corruption. And so they want to put all the power in the EPA, which they can control, right? And they don't want lawsuits coming into way and making a problem, because that's what they did with glyphosate. For 40 years, they had the EPA running in circles and kowtowing to them. And it took lawyers and real people who were hurt to bring them to their knees with the truth, but they don't want that anymore. So that's what the second part of the law is. It takes it out of the courts. It puts it strictly into the sole domain of the EPA, which, administration to administration could mean lots of different things. It's a complete crazy view of how to deal with this problem.
So you have somebody like Dewayne Lee Johnson who comes along and says, hey, I spilled this stuff on me and now I have cancer. Tough. What is the impact of Section 453 on people who come forward then with a problem, saying, hey, this stuff caused this problem?
I mean, it's even worse. So, for example, you show up to court. Lee Johnson shows up to court. He has experts in the world showing that it causes cancer, like we did. He has the evidence showing that Monsanto knew, that they hid it, that they didn't care, that they spent millions of dollars. All of that gets put in front of a court. And the court says, but here's the thing. I appreciate all this evidence, all this scientific data that you've presented to me. It doesn't matter, because if the EPA says it doesn't cause cancer, or if the EPA has yet to say that it causes cancer, you lose. And it doesn't matter what the evidence or truth is. The law says that they speak the truth, and that's what it is. And so I'm a judge. I apply the law. Your case is dead before you ever speak to a juror, before you ever get testimony, before your story gets told. It's dead on arrival.
Wow, that's a pretty good deal for industry. Who or what is pushing this legislation through Congress?
So it's clearly the pesticide industry, which when you say that, you're talking Bayer and Monsanto, right? Like we're talking, they are the, without question, they're doing this. And we know this because this argument that the EPA is the end all be all of truth is the argument they've been making in federal courts and state courts for the last 7-8 years, right? They keep saying is, oh, judge, the EPA is the best, whatever. And it keeps losing. They've lost it basically every single time. And so because the courts aren't giving them the relief they want, they're just bypassing the legal system altogether and going to legislature. They're making a political conversation. And so their lackeys in Congress are putting up these things to basically gift billions of dollars to the pesticide industry. That's literally the only effect. It's taking money out of hurt people's pockets, which they would have to pay, and just giving it to Bayer and Monsanto and saying, have at it, go poison the world and make money doing it, and no one can stop you now. I mean, it's truly a dystopian view of what regulatory bodies and a Congress is supposed to do. And it's happening and people aren't even like paying attention, right? They're just like, oh, well, you know, we don't like lawsuits, so we're going to go against them. No, it's not about lawsuits. It's about people's health. And God forbid you ever get sick, Mr. I hate lawsuits, because you're going to want to be able to get justice for you. And if you don't pay attention now, you will live in a world where the courts will be shut off to you. And that is a dark, dark place. Not because I want clients, because I want people to have a chance to make it right. And this is taking that away.
It seems like as an attorney going up against these giants, you're really speaking up for freedom of speech when it gets right down to it.
I think it's more powerful than freedom of speech. It's right to trial by jury, right? You look at the Constitution, and obviously I'm a lawyer, so this is something that I live and breathe. I'm an officer sworn to uphold it in some regards. The freedom of speech, the First Amendment covers a lot of things, but the other amendments also capture this, right? There's this idea that in our world, when you have a problem, you have a right to due process, you have a right to say, you have a right to do things. And no government law is going to restrict that. And I mean, just imagine you were to drink some coffee and it has cyanide on it, and someone and your loved one dies from it, right? Of course, you could sue the coffee company for poisoning your loved one. That's just basic common sense. If that happened to be a pesticide instead of a cup of coffee, this law says, no, in that case, you can't do anything. That's how insane this law is. It's treating pesticides different than other companies. That's what it's doing.
Is this similar to pharmaceutical immunity as well?
Well, yeah, this is where the playbook comes from. So I do a lot of pharmaceutical litigation as well. And there has been many attempts to say the FDA is the ultimate arbiter of pharmaceutical safety, the same arguments. But the law there is pretty clear. And the FDA, thankfully, has been pretty clear on this point that no, the person who's responsible for the safety of a drug is not the FDA. It's actually the manufacturer, because the FDA doesn't actually do studies. They don't actually do the science. The companies submit all the science to the FDA. The FDA reviews it and says, yeah, it looks good, fine, stamp of approval. But that doesn't mean that the data is right or that it's truthful. Like if it ends up being fraudulent, if it ends up being deceptive, that responsibility falls on the manufacturer, which is thankfully why we have lawsuits against drug companies when they conceal risks and people get hurt. Like it's pretty standard in our industry. And there is no law, at least being proposed by Congress, to immunize them yet. There is immunization, by the way, for certain types of pharmaceutical products, like vaccines, right? Vaccines you can't sue about. So that's an area where vaccine manufacturers have been put in a special place. There's a whole regulatory scheme around it. And so in any event, I just don't think we should treat vaccines the same way we treat pesticides. I think they're very, very different things. So
it seems then that litigation is the only preventative from allowing these corporations to do real harm. It's the threat of litigation. That's it.
I think there's some truth to that. I think litigation and cases are only as important as the regulatory agencies fail, right? And I tell people this all the time. I wish my job didn't exist. I would love to go write children's books or be a barista and enjoy my life, but instead of traveling around the country and not sleeping every day, right? But the reason why my job exists is because the regulatory agencies fail or because they're captured. I mean, one or the other. But if the FDA did its job, if the EPA did its job and made sure pesticides and drugs were safe, that they properly warned people of risks, and they really did that aggressively, there would be no lawsuits, right? Because it would be safe. So
but they don't really have a way of knowing, because they don't do the studies.
Oh, precisely.
They have to rely on the corporations to do the studies.
Yeah.
So the only thing that keeps the corporations on the straight and narrow is the threat of getting their butts sued and losing a bunch of money. And
I think it's a threat that the regulators will regulate them, right? Because if they lie to the regulators and the regulator finds out, they theoretically could do something about it. So there's that risk. But because that is not functional in our society, that the FDA and EPA have been captured for so long, you're right. It falls to lawyers. And it falls to us, scaring the bejesus out of their shareholders that they're going to have to pay billions of dollars in money if they don't get their... This is what I told the jury in the most recent Roundup case that I did. I said, at some point in the future, Monsanto or Bayer is going to have to make a decision about some new problem. They're going to have some risk on some pesticide, and some young lawyer in that boardroom is going to raise his hand and say, hey, guys, remember the Johnson case. Like, remember what happens when we do this. And it's not worth it to us financially to lie. And maybe in that moment, they'll do the right thing. They'll say it actually financially makes sense to do the right thing. And that's where our job is. We align the financial interests with morality. And that's the hope. I don't know if we always do it, but that's what we try to do. So,
well, it seems like Bayer AG made that calculation with respect to Monsanto's liability and decided, we'll buy it. And they bought it. They bought Monsanto and all of the liability. And what, $11 billion worth later?
Well, it's probably more like around 16 at this point, and it's still going. I mean, the Court of Appeals just approved a couple $1 billion judgment. So, I mean, it's growing, and it doesn't look like there's an end in sight. I think Monsanto and Bayer are seriously considering bankruptcy at this point because of this issue. I think there's people always ask me, particularly like people in finance, who say, well, what was going on? How did Bayer not realize this is a terrible company to buy with all this exposure and liability? And I say, I don't know. All I do know is a lot of those Monsanto executives who negotiated, the deal, the $68 billion sale to Bayer, they made out with a lot of money and are probably sitting somewhere pretty laughing at Bayer. So if I was Bayer, I would be very upset about this acquisition, how it's destroyed what was before that a really blue chip German, and they made baby aspirin. That was like Bayer, right? Like Bayer. How did you get into the Monsanto land, So
well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back to talk about what's in Section 453 with the man himself, Brent Wisner, who is the managing partner of Wisner Baum LLP. Right back.
You can earn a substantial income by farming for the city. All you need to do is take your crop to market and win the competition for the consumer dollars. There is a well-proven strategy for winning this competition. You will find it embedded in Metro Farm, the guide to growing in or near the city for the city.
Port Ideas, Greg Williams.
There's a tremendous amount of useful information in Metro Farm for farming in or near the city.
Acres USA's Charles Walters.
Metro Farm tells how to convert an opportunity into a real going concern. Every chapter is organized around the logic of practicality. For every problem needing a solution, Metro Farm offers a progression of steps arranged in sequence so the desired goal is achieved.
Before you plant your seeds, pick up a copy of the Ben Franklin Book of the Year award-winning Metro Farm. Then plant your seeds and win the dollars. Metrofarm.com. Metrofarm.com.
We're on the farm with Joel Salatin.
Would you like to buy homemade soup, backyard chicken, and the neighbor's artisanal lunch meat? The Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund protects your right to acquire the food of your choice from the source of your choice. I'm Joel Salatin from Polyface Farm, and I urge you to defend the right of neighbors to engage in direct food commerce. Join today at farmtoconsumer.org. The food of your choice from the source of your choice. That's farmtoconsumer.org. Farmtoconsumer.org. Thank you.
When you buy local American-grown flowers, flowers will grow and flourish in America. Hello, I'm Deborah Prinzing, author of Slow Flowers for certified American-grown flowers. When you buy local flowers, you're helping our country's family farms reduce the transportation footprint of flowers and enjoy fresher, longer-lasting bouquets. So please, next time you shop for flowers, think local. Think certified American-grown flowers. Visit AmericanGrownFlowers.org to learn more.
History buffs. This tale from Michael Olson's Tales from a Tin Can took place aboard the USS Dale during the opening moments 7 December 1941.
As we left our berth and got underway, the deck force was still engaged in getting ready for combat. Fuller had the job of clearing the deck of all the wooden objects that had collected in port, so Fuller was making his way aft, just tossing stuff like a madman, when he came to the ice cream freezer. Before he could toss it over the side, one of the guys said, "Hey, wait a minute!" In a matter of seconds, the lock was broken and the ice cream distributed among the crew. So, what you saw that morning was the USS Dale steaming hell-bent out to the channel while the guys back aft were standing by their guns, eating ice cream and watching World War II break out all around.
Tales from a Tin Can contains 424 tales by 44 sailors aboard the USS Dale, from Pearl Harbor to Tokyo Bay. Order your Father's Day copy at talesfromatincan.com. That's talesfromatincan.com.
Welcome back. This is the Food Chain Radio program. Michael Olson with Brent Wisner. And we're talking pesticide labeling and liability. Those who manufacture pesticides, in light of the $16 billion that they have been fined for not allowing people to know what's in the soup, so to speak, are trying to figure out how to protect themselves. So they're pushing Section 453, which is a pesticide labeling and immunity law through Congress. If they can get it, then they can do with pesticides pretty much what they want. It would seem frightening what they could do if this law actually passed, in terms of what kind of potions and lotions they could come up with to kill things. Am I wrong?
I mean, that's exactly right. And I think more problematically about this law is, left to their own devices, left to an anemic or pathetic EPA regulation, we're left with, well, then you have no recourse, right? Like, you have no lawsuits, you have no way of trying to make things right. Your father or your mother dies and there's nothing you can do about it, or your loved one dies, or your kids die. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's just so deeply wrong. And I don't know why we would go out of our way to treat and protect pesticide makers differently, or as a special breed of company in our society. It's just a money grab, and it's a shameful one at that.
The one thing that strikes me is the need from agriculture for these herbicides and pesticides. Mm-hmm. We haven't developed industrialized production systems that rely on them. We need them.
Sure.
So it would seem to me like the president of the American Soybean Association and corn growers and so on would be backing this legislation. Is that?
Well, of course they are. I mean, they represent, yes, they would, because they are largely funded by companies that rely on Monsanto's products. So yes, like they have a contractual obligation to support things like this.
A number of years ago, I had an opportunity to sit in on a panel of the American Biotech Association, big convention in Chicago. On the panel with me were like the president of the American Soybean Association,
Sure.
corn, hogs, all of the industrial agriculture, and then me. And in the audience were the people doing the biotech innovations, and when it came time for me to give my conclusion, I just said, you folks in the audience have created magic. Now these farmers with me here on the panel can grow 1,000 acres of crops with no weeds, no pests. This is truly a miracle. You've made these farmers rich. You've made yourself rich. But sooner or later, people who eat the food that you manufacture are going to come to you and say, what's in this for us other than foods that have been drenched in herbicides and infused with pesticides?
Mm-hmm.
Someday they're going to come to you and want to know what's in it for them. Do you think that day will ever come?
Well, I know it's coming. I think it's part of what these lawsuits are about. But truth is, these are generational problems, right? Like, look at any industry, right? Look at any industry that is extremely profitable. There's almost always some externality that they are not having to bear the cost of. Like, for example, oil, right? We burn a lot of oil. We burn a lot of gasoline, a lot of petrol, and it's causing the world to get warmer. That is an externality. It pollutes environments, yada, yada, yada. Okay, fine. That is a thing that's happening. The the oil companies are not paying for that. They are not paying for rising waters, the damages to property. They are not paying for the health consequences. They're not paying for cities becoming inhabitable. They are not paying for any of that. That is being borne by the world. That is an externality. They get the profit from the sale of it and not pay for the consequences. Same thing in pesticides. The problem is, like in global warming, these are generational. The generation that's going to pay for it is not ours. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's our kids' kids and their kids. And honestly, when it comes to like the burning of oil and carbon-based fuels, the ship sailed. We can't stop it. It's going to happen a couple generations from now. There's nothing to prevent it from happening. And the oil companies have made trillions of dollars and will never pay for it. That's the world we live in. And if we want to do something about it, maybe we can. I don't know. Maybe our children will. But I will say when it comes to pesticides, it's the same problem. The effects of these pesticides are going to have generational consequences. They're affecting fertility. They're affecting our children's physical mitochondrial makeups, their microbiomes. And the simple fact is like, for example, with glyphosate, we've sprayed more glyphosate on food and agriculture and land in the United States than every other pesticide ever sprayed combined in history. We do that on an annual basis. That's how much this stuff is out there.
Epigenetics.
Oh gosh. I mean, there's these studies where they show, you look at like these mice and you expose a generation to heavy amounts of glyphosate. And then you look at the offspring and the offspring of the offspring of them who aren't exposed to glyphosate. They're just the offspring of those people who were exposed. And you have severe genetic defects, lack of survival, all sorts of problems. And I mean, if that's true, if 4 or 5 generations from now we're going to bear the consequences of severe physical damage, I mean, we won't be alive to see it. And will Monsanto be around to pay for it? It's an externality. It's borne by a different group and they make the profit in the interim. And that's wrong. That's wrong from an economic perspective and it's wrong from a moral perspective. And that's just the way we live in. That's the world we live in. And so, yes, it may be a miracle product or it could have been literally a disaster to humanity. Time will tell. And right now it's not looking great for Monsanto.
What is Wisner Baum LLP doing to stop this? I mean, you can't sue anybody for it yet because it's not there. And I don't see any money in it for you. But here you are standing up against it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the truth is, what are we doing about it? What we can, right? I've donated lots of my personal money to advocacy organizations to oppose this. I've devoted a lot of my personal time.
Well, wait, that's a good one. We know who's pushing it. It's industry. Who's standing up against it?
It's people who care about this issue and see that it's something that's worth fighting for. So there's a group of trial lawyers who are fighting hard to oppose it. The American Association for Justice is one of them. I'm a member of it. There's other organizations, farmer organizations, organic farming organizations who want to fight this and oppose it. So there are people who are standing up against it. There are congressmen who do listen to this issue and care about their constituents, who aren't beholden to industry, and we're pressing them. So we're fighting it on as best as we can. I mean, we're out funded $100 to one. I mean, it's It's David v. Goliath, right? We are fighting an uphill battle, but we are doing that. I personally will talk to anyone who will listen to me about this issue. I've got on radios and news stations, whoever will listen, to raise awareness, because if people realize this is insane, we don't want this, we should do something about it. Congressmen at the end of the day are elected still, and so hopefully the pressure of a response from their constituency will cause them to not kowtow to a corporation. That's the hope. So we're doing what we can. And maybe I'll bring some more lawsuits. Maybe I'll do a constitutional challenge. I mean, those are the only things that I can do. And at some point, I'm limited because I'm not a congressman. I'm not dictator of the world. I am a citizen like anybody else who just has the right to go to a court of law and plead my case. So
this pesticide labeling and immunity legislation is going around the states already.
That's right.
So it's being pitched in different states. Hey, let's enact this legislation, protect our pesticide industry. 9 states have said no. 2 states have allowed it. North Dakota and I think Georgia.
That's
correct. They said, we'll buy into this. We'll protect our pesticide industry.
Correct.
So 9-2, it would seem like the odds are in your favor, or in the anti-453, that this isn't going to go through.
Yeah.
And yet federal might be different than state with respect to acceptance, because I don't know, perhaps that's where the money goes, right?
Well, I mean, just to put that in context, right? You're in Georgia and you get exposed to glyphosate and you try to bring a lawsuit, you can't anymore. You're done. Your case is over. Everyone in Georgia, millions of people who could be potentially harmed, are no longer able to sue because of that law. Just to put that in context. The federal law would apply to everybody, right? So which is much broader in reach, but that's the reality of it. And all those laws that get passed in those states, the 2 that it have, were done like under the cover of night when no one was paying attention. I mean, it's not a situation where there was a lot of oral advocacy or groups really discussing it. It is done, a bought and paid for state legislator goes and produces a bill. Everyone says, oh, we vote party lines, whatever. Next thing you know, it's passed and no one actually asks what the hell we just did. That's what happened. The 9 states that have rejected it, we were able to activate a grassroots response and say, hold on, what are you actually doing here? Let's actually talk about this. And then when they talk about it, they all realize this is a terrible idea. We're not going to do this. But that's the reality of it. And so Bayer is taking a full-fronted attack. They're attacking it on the federal level, which I think we're resisting, and hopefully we can stop it from happening. And they're attacking it on the statewide level, and they've had some success there, and obviously some failures as well. So
what happens to us who eat food if this passes? How does it impact how we see our food chain and the safety and the efficacy of what we're being told about what's in our food? Who do we believe then? If they control the labeling laws and if they have immunity, who can we believe?
That's a good question. And I am not the arbiter myself of truth, as much as I try to provide truth to juries and courtrooms. There's a lot of really smart scientists out there, but it's really difficult when you don't have a single source that you can just rely on. And I will just say point blank, you cannot rely on the EPA and you cannot rely on the FDA sight unseen. And the reason for that is they don't have the greatest track record, right? They have screwed up repeatedly multiple times on multiple issues for decades. And to think that, because the FDA says it's safe, it must be safe, or the EPA says it's safe, it must be safe. I mean, you can agree with that. You can go down that road. That's a fool's errand. I don't care what side of the political divide you fall on. That's naive. But where do you get the truth? How do consumers do something about it? I don't know. And that's a bigger problem that needs to be solved by smarter people than myself. I will say telling people the informed consent should guide that inquiry, that when you pick up a food product, you should know what's in it, whether there's lead, arsenic, glyphosate, or whatever. It shouldn't just tell you all the protein and sugars in it. It should tell you everything else. And I don't know why we don't require that. That seems like that could be a pretty easy solution. And then when I'm deciding what I want to buy, I can say, well, I'm not going to eat this. This is filled with a pesticide I don't want. Oh, look at this product. This doesn't have it. So I'm going to eat less rice and more quinoa or whatever, right? I can make those choices on a personal level, or I cannot. I mean, people still smoke cigarettes. People have the choice to do what they're going to do with their bodies, but that's our choice as Americans. And I think giving people choice is probably the truly American way of solving this problem. Instead of trying to police what people eat or what people do, we just give people the full information and they can decide for themselves how they want to expose themselves or their family to whatever.
So you can eat what you want to eat. You have a choice, but caveat emptor. You must make the decision, and you must do so based on the knowledge that you have accrued.
Precisely. And the knowledge that's given to you, right? Like I'm involved in another litigation. I'm leading it, actually. It's involving baby food containing high levels of arsenic and lead in it. And, putting aside whether or not there should be arsenic or lead in baby food, which, by the way,
95% of baby food.
Yeah, there should not be either of those in those foods, right? That's just be put up. But even if there is going to be some, you should tell mothers and fathers how much is in it. And if they're looking at apple purees from two different companies, and one of them has non-detectable levels and one of them has some lead in it, let them choose. And I think they'll choose with their pocketbook and the most purely capitalistic way. But it doesn't happen unless it's disclosed. It doesn't happen unless they have that information.
Is the baby food industry protected like the pesticide industry is protected, or want to be protected?
No. I sue Gerber. I sue Beechnut. No, they're not protected unless they try to get legislation passed to protect them. But we're still not in that land. We're still in the process of proving our case in a court of law. But they haven't pulled the Bayer tactic just yet.
Given the amount of money, it would seem like this fight is going to go on because there's so much money in pesticides and herbicides because of the industrial processes that we employ. And thankfully, there are people like Attorney Brent Wisner who are watching out for us, because in thinking about it, I can't see who else is when it gets right down to it. So thank you, Brent Wisner, and your teams for watching out for us and making certain we somehow live to eat another day, I guess. So thank you all for tuning in. Remember Michael Olson's third law of the food chain: cheap food isn't. Thank you, Brent, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having me. It was great chatting with you.
You've been listening to the award-winning Food Chain Radio Show with Michael Olson. And if your friends missed the show, tell them to log on the Food Chain page at metrofarm.com for a listen. Now, go out and find some food with its farmer's face on it and live.